Salutations. Today is December 31st, 2022. It is the end of the year. This is the end of the year video. Let me start by saying that I am not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. This information is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. Today we will be talking about stock symbol MMTLP, or what used to be stock symbol MMTLP and has become the new private shares next bridge Hydrocarbons. If you do not know what I am talking about, I will not go over that information. I will instead refer you to these two videos. MMTLP, the FINRA fraud fiasco continues Monday, and MMTLP, the story is coming to a close. The FINRA fraud fiasco continues Monday. We'll tell you all about the outrageous U3 halt that took place, where the stock was actually halted from trading, and what's going on at FINRA, and who's responsible for what. It diagrams the whole thing out. MMTLP, the story is coming to a close. We'll tell you the story of MMTLP and 3.2 billion barrels of oil in the ground in West Texas near El Paso, and what's going on with that and how much that's worth and whatnot. You should check out both videos if you want details and information. The videos in the description also provide links to other videos, which will provide you more details, more information. There's a lot that you can find out about this. In any case, let's move forward. So my last video talked a little bit about public brokerages. These are brokerages that are also public companies at the same time. For instance, we talked about this firm, Charles Schwab, right? They are listed on the New York Stock Exchange under the stock symbol SCHW, okay? And Charles Schwab runs both Schwab Investments and also TD Ameritrade. But they are not the only publicly traded firm that's a brokerage account. So I thought I would have a look and see what other firms are also publicly traded firms that are also brokerages. And I did this. I ran a stock screener on Fidelity. Right now, Fidelity, by the way, is a private brokerage. And in either case, what you can do is run a stock screener. In this case, I looked for things in the financial sector, capital markets, and further decreased that to investment banking and brokerage, and we found all of these companies. And I sorted them by market capitalization. So Charles Schwab, which runs Schwab and TD Ameritrade, has a market cap of $153 billion, and they are the largest publicly traded firm that is also a brokerage, and that's their primary business, right, is being a brokerage. So why is this important? Well, if we combine that with the list of firms where you could actually purchase stock symbol MMTLP shares in the past, you'll see that Schwab and TD Ameritrade are, of course, at the top of the list. But there are other firms. Fidelity, of course, is private, and you got Chase Bank. That could be That could be under JP Morgan Chase, and they do banking as well. So they're more than just a brokerage. But anyway, that's the list of the firms. And with that, we'll go next to what John Berta has to say. Thanks to Syntax Queen of the Metaverse for setting up the Twitter Space. It's a 3-hour Twitter Spaces thing, so I'm just gonna play some excerpts that I found interesting. I may have found these are things that I personally find interesting. Other people may find different elements of Twitter Spaces interesting, but I'm not going to go over the entire 3 hours, of course. That would not be time effective. Anyway, this is a Twitter Space. The recordings are time limited, so check it out if you want to. John Berta does speak at the start of it. Let's hear what he has to say.
When AST issued the shares, they're 165.5 million. Everybody knows that. There was only 2.5 million at AST that were in individuals' names. Okay, the rest were in street name, which means that one account statement was sent to DTCC, and then they had to look on their books and decide what each individual clearing firm had due to them, and so they sent that information back to AST, and then AST turns around and sends a gross certificate, or basically a gross statement. For example, to E-Trade is 13 million shares, and TD Ameritrade is 53 million shares, and that's how they send it out. Now, if you're at TD Ameritrade and their books say there's 53 million shares long exactly, then you have no issues.
So if their books are correct, you have no issues, right? But we'll talk about their books a little bit later on.
Yeah, so basically it comes down to, now that we have a line in the sand, we have a baseline amount. Now we have to press the issue behind the scenes on, by the folks that we're hiring to do some investigations as to, is that number truly correct at TD? Is that number truly correct at E-Trade? Is that number truly correct at everybody who got shares from DTC? For example, Citadel got 2,900 shares.
So Citadel got 2,900 shares.
There's a silent pause.
Sorry, there was such a silent pause that I I thought I thought he was over. But anyway, Citadel got 2,900 shares at that point in time. I mean, which that means 2,900 shares. Chances are you may have more shares than Citadel, right? I mean, does that make sense to you that you could be an owner with more shares than Citadel? Well, let's hear some more of what he has to say.
Unfortunately, I think it's until the SEC and FINRA decide that they're going to come down on these folks, which is really only a function of us applying pressure, which everybody's doing a great job of. But we still need to keep the squeaky wheel going, because that's who's going to make this stop. And now the other side of that, from legal perspectives, we can do discovery and due diligence and get some information that there truly is an imbalance. But until you actually sue them in a court of law, then you won't know what that imbalance is, because they're not going to tell us. They're not going to open up and say, yeah, I'm 14 million shares on the wrong side of this, right? They won't do that. But I think, this is a multiple prong approach, and I think we're doing the best we can with the information that we have. So I applaud everybody for keeping the pressure on, from Congress to celebrities to talk shows to internet shows. All of that stuff is important because it just gets the word out. So the more, if this ever gets swept under the rug or people stop talking about it, then it'll be much harder for us to get what we want.
So that was a big statement. It's important that we keep the pressure going, right? It's important that we keep talking about this as much as we can. It's important that this information gets out. As far as I know, it's not out in mainstream media. Mainstream media will not cover this because they are afraid to cover this, right? But at some point, enough people will be talking about it that mainstream media may start covering it, right? And when that happens, well, that's a far bigger problem than just one little tiny company. It's a far bigger problem than at that point. But let's hear some more about what John Berta has to say.
Well, you guys, you've seen my tweets about who we're talking to. We're trying to get all of the agreements in place to hire the folks that can actually do the due diligence and has access to, for example, all of the trades from the last 5 years in Torchlight, Metamaterials, and MMTLP, every single trade. To be able to go through that and then actually pair them off with the buyer and the seller, whether they were marked short or whether they were marked where it was a long sale, and whether or not the share was borrowed, and all of that becomes an accumulative project. And so thankfully there's a computer program that does all that, which I don't have, and but this group that we're hiring does all of that. So that should be started, I would hope, by Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. And he's ready to move and can move very quickly on it. But there's a lot of information that needs to be gathered.
So there's a lot of info that needs to be gathered for that, but they are starting. They're doing a forensic analysis of all the trades for the last 5 years. That is quite that was quite enlightening. We'll see what the actual number of longs that may be in actuality. But we also have some good questions from Kitty Cat, I believe. Let's hear what she has to say.
Shareable in the public domain or not? I'd have to check and see. One thing I will be able to tell you is if there's an imbalance. So the first things that they do is actually check on DTCC ins and outs, so to speak, for the last 5 years, including on all 3 tickers. And one of the first things they do is that if there is an imbalance in DTCC, then the imbalance on broker-to-broker clearing is significantly higher. And so those people that have an imbalance on DTCC are the likely culprits on broker-to-broker clearing as well. And so that's, once you have that information, then you basically, start filing suit. So, and because you know who the culprits are.
Gotcha.
But when they come back with the first bit of information, it's not going to be all of it. It's going to be enough for us to file suit and get more discovery directly from them.
Okay, that makes sense. And then as far as so I'm not sure if you've been told for sure that like AST is full. Do we know if it is?
No, AST is not. This concept of full is a little I don't want to say misleading, because it is what it is, but they were issued 165.5 million shares for NextBridge, correct? And so when they turned around and issued them to the shareholders, they issued 2.5 million to the people that had already registered their shares at AST, which means they weren't in a broker dealer anymore. They were at AST.
Right.
Then the rest, 163 million, were issued to DTCC. And because it's not DTC eligible, they actually sent the shares back to AST with a breakout of who gets the shares. And that breakout could be, I could tell you there's 40 or 50 broker dealers involved and clearinghouses involved. So that's how it's done. It's done with the clearinghouses because guys like Trading 212, which is a broker dealer, clears through Apex. So they send them out and they say, hey, AST, TD Ameritrade gets 53 million, E-Trade gets 13 million. And then AST notifies TD Ameritrade of how many they're getting. And then it's up to TD Ameritrade to balance their own books internally. So if TD Ameritrade is showing 75 million longs and they're only getting 53 million shares, well, then they have a problem.
And is that 53 million like an actual number that you know, or is that just kind of like an estimate? Or
that's an actual number that I know.
Oh, okay. Cool. And then so then are they actually sending paper certificates back to the brokerages? Because,
No.
Fidelity yesterday, they're not.
They're not. No, it actually is a statement. So AST doesn't like to send out certificates anymore because people lose them.
Right.
And so they do it in basically in a statement, and they send a statement to E-Trade saying, your account here has 13 million shares of NextBridge, and then it's up to the E-Trade shareholder, the person who owns NextBridge at E-Trade to say, I want you to ACAT my 1,000 shares to AST so it's registered in my name and I get my own account statement.
Yeah. So yesterday, what it sounded like was, Fidelity was claiming that they received via FedEx certificates or something like that. So in my mind, I was assuming that they're talking about paper, but, based on the S1 and everything too, it didn't sound like AST was issuing paper certificates. So it just kind of didn't make sense.
No, they really don't like to do it because it's just chaos, right? And
and it costs them money, I'm sure,
Yep.
Yeah. All right, cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so there are no paper certificates. This is all being done it's all being done at an account at AST, and account statements are being mailed out. That's basically what's going on. John Berta has some other info to talk about. I'm just going to close it up with his views on risk and what happens.
The other aspect I would say on that, you mentioned that there's infinite risk on both sides. That's not true. You know what your risk is. If you pay $1 or $1.50, it can go to zero and you lose $1.50. If someone shorts that stock, they are acutely aware that stock could go to 100, and that's their risk. So that's why the short game is risky. So I just wanted to put that out there.
The short game is risky, and that's basically what you're up against. Is the other side is afraid that these private shares will go to the other side was afraid that MMTLP would go to 100 or higher because they have to close out their short position. They have a limited amount of time to do that because they refuse to be doing it over time, or they believe that they cannot do that. So at that point, the prices could go to 100, 1,000, maybe 10,000. Who knows? It's hard to say. I want to get back to one other statement, though. If we look at, we see that 2.5 million shares were directly registered to individuals at AST. It brings up another interesting point. If we look at the top 4 shareholders, McCabe, Stewart, David, and John Berta, we know that at least the top 3 have way more than 2.5 million shares. So therefore, it is very likely that all of those shares, so we know that the top 3 for sure are held in street name. Definitely, for sure. It is probably very likely that Berta is also got his shares in street name as well too. I don't know that for sure, but I'm just saying that's probably the plan. Okay, it's probably the plan. Now, so what is Berta's plan? What is the broker's plan? What is the broker's plan going forward? I believe at this point, I think I have an idea of what the broker's plan is, and to be honest, it's not much of a plan. It might work, but I don't think it's much of a plan. I mentioned this earlier, where there was an account that I have at Fidelity, and we saw that there was a new CUSIP number that came out with the symbol description as Nexbridge Hydrocarbons, and and of course the CUSIP, the symbol and CUSIP are different than what was there for the MMTLP, which was also a placeholder. I think this is also a placeholder. And I think what happened is that the brokers got some shares, right? The brokers got some shares as a result of the DTCC, right? And, so what happened was the DTCC said, hey, there's this many MMTLP shares. Hand out your Nexbridge Hydrocarbon shares to the broker-dealers. So they got some shares, but those shares are what I like to call net shares, right? What do I mean by net shares? There's a process that I described in an earlier video called continuous net settlement. Basically, a broker has long shares and short shares. And when the broker, wants a net number of shares, they take the long shares, subtract the short shares, then they have a net number of shares, right? So that means that they will get the net number of shares, and the shorts have to cover their position, right? Their position, which is whatever theirs is. We don't know how the shorts can do that. Maybe they don't, maybe they can try a cash position or something, but it's the short shares that are in question here. Of the short shares can be broken down into those that have actually borrowed shares, and those that have not borrowed shares. Those that are naked, right? Naked shorts. Naked shorts are largely the positions of market makers, and there is generally a large amount of naked shorting that's going on. We don't know how much that is, though. So it's the naked shorts that are due, right? And they will have to cover their positions by buying the shares either from Nexbridge Hydrocarbons or buying the shares from you and me, or buying the obligation to deliver the shares, right? They can either buy the shares from people who have shares, buy the shares from Nexbridge Hydrocarbons, in which case they will, Nexbridge Hydrocarbons can charge them a large amount of money because they're diluting the shares. We know this is the situation that they're in. If they try to buy them from individuals, chances are they may find some individuals who will sell it to them for a cheap price. They probably will find other individuals who will say, no, I won't sell it to you for anything less than, $1,000 a share, maybe 2,000, who knows, maybe 3,000, maybe more, right? So that's where they're at, right? So again, I believe that there was a temporary placeholder CUSIP, and if we do have shares, we should be able to transfer those shares to AST quickly and easily. We're seeing that there are problems with people trying to ACAT their shares, trying to DRS their shares. That indicates to me that those are not real shares. I do not believe that they are real shares. If it's so difficult to actually move these shares around, are they real, or are they synthetic? Who knows? Anyway, Among the brokers who are allocated shares, there are different brokers, right? Some brokers, maybe they have a small short position. For other brokers, they may have a very large short position, right? So each broker will have their own particular position that they'll need to worry about. And if they have a very small short position, maybe it's something that they can easily deal with. If they have a very large position, it may be difficult for them to deal with that. But at the end of the day, they will need to cover all shares that are, they'll need to cover all shares, and in particularly the shares that people want directly registered to AST. So if you wanted to register your shares to AST, the broker cannot deny you that, and they will have to try to find those shares from somewhere. So directly registering means that the broker will be incentivized to find your shares. He may not want to do that because the shares may not exist for him. He may need to do a margin call to the shorts. He may need to force a purchase of shares. He may need to buy shares from NextBridge Hydrocarbons and then send a bill to the shorts for all we know. I don't know how that works, but that's what they need to do. But right now, I believe that their current plan is to delay, and to delay as long as possible, and hope that shareholders will forget what's going on. They hope you will get bored, and they'll hope that you will stop making noise. So, with that in mind, I will continue to make these videos because I am not bored, I am not going away, and I have no desire to stop making videos. And this is a very interesting topic. But their plan is, the broker's plan at least, is to delay as long as possible with the hope that shareholders will get bored. Okay. I think the brokers know the situation. I think the number of shares that are out there is large enough that it may be greater than the number of shares the number of shares that are naked shorted may be greater than the number of shares which actually even exist, for all we know. In which case, this is a very, very big problem. And the other thing is, the size of the problem matters, because if this problem becomes, if we keep making noise, right, and this is a very big problem, the brokers and the people who run the financial system in the United States, they will not want to hear of a small group of people making a lot of noise questioning the financial system. I mean, if word gets out that the shorts are selling more shares than exist, right, there will inevitably be the question, is this the only stock that's happened to? Is this a fluke? Or is this happening to every single stock in the U.S., in the U.S. markets, right? That's not a question anyone wants to ask, but that's a question that is on the table. And the reason that question is on the table is because once you hear about this one problem, is this an isolated incident, or is this a more general problem, right? Were you, of the 5,000 stocks that are available in the country, right, in the U.S., were you so incredibly lucky that you found the one stock that had this one problem? Or is it likely that there are a large number of stocks? Is this the majority case? It is very hard to say because very few companies have gone private. But when they do, will they have this same exact problem? The U.S. stock market, by the way, is a $30 trillion market cap. Okay, the U.S. stock market is worth $30 trillion. There's a lot of money out there. There's a lot of money that is at risk. And it's not just the simple $150 million, $200 million, maybe 300. I mean, it's not the simple $150 billion, $200 billion, $300 billion. That, granted, it's a fair amount of money. It's a hell of a lot less than $30 trillion. $30 trillion is what's at stake. And that's what should be well known. The longer this problem remains on the books, the longer this problem is out there, and the greater the chance that it will come to light. The chances are, it's starting to get picked up. When people hear about it, it's news. And when people question the validity of the U.S. stock market, that's a $30 trillion problem. That's not a problem that anyone in their right mind who runs the financial system wants to have. Anyway, that's just my thoughts on this. Again, I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. This information is, of course, it's there for entertainment and educational purposes only. I am also not a legal advisor. This is not legal advice. Rosa Twill is doing a legal lawsuit as well with the federal court in Florida. We'll see where that goes. So far, as of December 31st, 2022, we're seeing that there has been no movement yet on that. The judge has the case. She's done everything that she needs to do with regards to filing. It is now in the judge's court, and where he can issue summary judgment. Now, the interesting thing is, the other side of this case, FINRA, has not responded. And it'll be very interesting. The judge is giving them ample time to respond. But if they don't respond, the judge can go off and make a summary decision. And that would be perfectly fine. He can turn back time and say, hey, you need to close your short positions. You need to do this because we can't have shorts going into a private company. It doesn't make any sense. Anyway, it is December 31st, 2022. That's what's going on. Again, I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. This information is, of course, intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. Happy New Year. And I wish you a Happy New Year. And I will talk to you next year. Goodbye.